Hey everybody, CVH here, and today we're returning to the Budget-ify series on this channel. If you're unfamiliar with the Budget-ify series and you haven't seen any of the other installments, I believe we're on number 6 now, what we do is we take an established deck, a deck that you'd probably be able to see a lot of on the Legend ladder in a mostly optimized form, pretty basic build that you wouldn't be surprised to see at high Legend ladder, and we Budget-ify it and make it more accessible to craft by removing all of the epics and legendaries and replacing them with the commons and rares. So this is for new players building their collection for the first time. We've done a variety of different decks, and I'm pretty excited in today's video because we get to look at one of my all-time favorite decks in Legends, Midrange Sorcerer. I'm actually very surprised that it's taken me so long to get to this deck for the Budget-ify series, but let's get right into it. The deck list we'll be looking at today, to start with, before we Budget-ify it, will be Lateralis 19's list that he played at High Legend at the end of last season, and I chose it, like I said, not necessarily because it's what I would play myself exactly card for card, but it is something that's more or less standard, something you wouldn't be surprised to see any of these cards in a list at High Legend, so it's a good starting place. And now we have to get into the tough part and take out all of the epics and legendaries and replace them with commons and rares. And through replacing the cards, it also teaches about what we're looking for, basically what kind of cards fill specific roles. Like I mentioned in the basics of aggro, midrange, and control video, this is going to be a primarily aggressive deck, not necessarily as straightforward and all about aggression as an aggro deck, but we will be trying to play the aggressor against control decks while having a bit of reach in the late game, a bit of ways to keep pushing our offensive as the game goes longer with some more heavy threats that you wouldn't normally see in an aggro deck. In this version, you can see that there are Emmerich's, Shornhelm Champion, Bone Colossus, Supreme Atromancer, all that good stuff, a lot of which we're going to have to cut. But we first start our cuts in the 3-drops with Daggerfall Mage and Dark Guardian. And while Dark Guardian is a common, it does come from the Fall of the Dark Brotherhood expansion, so just as we did in the Ram Scout Budget-ify video, which I believe was the last in the series, we will be cutting Dark Guardians, and this is a pretty easy replacement to make, however, because there's a card that's very similar in blue, Camlorn Sentinel. So we're putting 3 Camlorn Sentinels in. We now have the Prophecy Guard instead of the additional effect of potentially drawing cards, and slightly weaker stats. But that does mean we are a little bit more in intelligence and less in endurance. So when we're swapping out Daggerfall Mage, which is a very specific, unique card, and I don't mean unique legendary, there's some confusion there. This is a unique legendary, these are all not. But Daggerfall Mage, very hard to just replace, but we will be putting in a card that you see in a lot of Sorcerer decks already that Lateralis opted not to include, because we will be slightly more in intelligence, Cunning Ally. So obviously we aren't super favored on the Cunning Ally. If we look at the list as it stands, we're at 36, but it's pretty close to as good as you can get in a lot of these lists, and we'll see how we end up, but I'm pretty sure it winds up being a little bit more favored than it was prior. But Cunning Ally, totally reasonable on 3. The additional Firebolts can be pretty huge against other aggressive decks. So moving on, a lot of the cards in this deck, I should mention, by the way, that are very curve-centric and what really make the deck good are commons and rares. So you already have the Ward Crafters, the Windkeep Spell Swords, the Haunting Spirits, the Young Mammoths. These are the real important turn 2 and turn 3 cards. The Royal Sages, pretty crazy stuff. So if you're looking to build this deck, definitely make sure you have 3 of those rares. They're very important, and they're really why the deck functions, so I don't think we'll be losing too much through Budget-ifying it. But we will be losing Shadowfen Priest, and we lose this card in pretty much every Endurance deck. We Budget-ify because it's that good. It sees play in almost all of them. But I have played the replacement we're going to go for in Constructed before, and it hasn't been that bad. We will still be able to retain a silence effect to the deck by playing Cursed Spectre. We do lose out on some stats. We do lose out on like a more beefy 5-drop. We definitely can't destroy supports with the Spectre, but it does have the added benefit, as with the Sentinel, of being Prophecy. So we do see that we've already doubled the Prophecy count of the deck. So there's one, silver lining there with that replacement. Don't mind Cursed Spectre. When you're looking for those extra points of damage trying to bypass a large guard, you'll probably want the silence, rather, and the Prophecy can be very important against an aggro deck, simply because all of a sudden you have an additional 2/2 that can trade with something. If your opponent's playing an item deck, you can silence the items off of it. You get the idea. Sometimes this card can be significantly better than Shadowfen Priest, but overall Shadowfen Priest is generally regarded as much better. And besides that, the 4-drop seem in line, and then we have the Shornhelm Champion and High King Emmerich. So we have another, well, I should mention that if you want to play Sorcerer, Emmerich is a perfectly reasonable thing to get your hands on. I have yet to see a Sorcerer deck that doesn't want Emmerich. Shornhelm is also a pretty good mid-game threat, so we are going to be trying to not lose our entire mid game. Basically, we are a mid-range deck. We don't want to just be a weaker aggro deck that all of a sudden doesn't have any mid game, because we can't really end the game super fast with what we have on turns 1 through 4 typically. But I will be adding in again something that has seen play in a lot of mid-range sorcerer lists, and I still play it in mine occasionally, depending on the meta. Blackworm Necromancer, recently nerfed from 5 to 6. Obviously, we wouldn't even be talking about it if it was a 5-drop. It would be in the deck already. We wouldn't even have to re-include it. But the ability to be ahead on life is something that is pretty common with this deck. The Royal Sages and Blackworms can then take advantage of that. And Blackworm can be very swingy even at a 6 Magicka cost when you get it on the board. Like I said, a lot of your 2-drops and 3-drops are some of the best things you can do on those turns. So getting them back for free with the Necromancer can significantly widen your board, make it that much harder for your opponent to kill everything. And of course, if they can't kill everything, eventually all of your things are going to kill them. So Blackworm Necromancer can really keep the aggression going even better than Shornhelm or even Emmerich in the right situation. But we do lose some other late game threats that we have to replace. Starting with Bone Colossus. I usually play 3 in my builds. Lateralis has included only 2, which does make it a little bit easier to replace. Still very sad to see it go, as it is one of those cards that does make your board really wide really quickly. And I'm not really stoked about the replacement, but simply because I don't want to lose all of the mid-game in this deck, we will be including 2 Swamp Leviathans, which you might remember from the Budget-ify Ram Scout video. Not a fantastic card, but it is beefy, and in the right situation, if you're just looking for something with stat points that can start attacking for a lot, Swamp Leviathan can do that for you. It's pretty easy to deal with, it's slow, it's just this big threat. Your opponent's not going to have a hard time shackling, but if you're just looking for something else to add to your pressure, Swamp Leviathan can get the job done, and it's pretty much all, if you look through the 5+ drops in Intelligence, Endurance, and Neutral, it's pretty much the best option we have in the common and rare categories. Unfortunately, we also lose Supreme Atromancer, which is extra reach, pretty huge against control decks that don't use Ice Storm. A lot of the time, like I mentioned, I use 2 of these in 3 Bone Colossus, but the ratios have been reversed. Unfortunately, nothing really does what Supreme Atromancer does. I will say this card is still pretty reasonable without the 2 damage pings it deals in this deck, just because it makes your board that much more threatening. And I don't actually have the unupgraded version Expert Atromancer, but I think at level 20 you actually get one. So if you do have the one of Expert Atromancer that you get from the story mode or leveling up or whatever it is, feel free to include it. I do think the 3/3 plus the 2 5/3s with Breakthrough totally fine in this deck as a one of. Unfortunately, I don't have access to that, and we can't play the actual Supreme Atromancer, so what I'm going to do instead is just make the deck a little bit lower curve, and take out Supreme Atromancer for like the polar opposite card we could think of in Crown Quartermaster, because I think Crown Quartermaster, of all the common and rare 1-drops, is probably the best we could play in this deck. The effect is relatively useful when you're trying to trade up with things, functions well with the skilled Blacksmith. We did lose Daggerfall Mage for that. You could play Tome of Alteration, I guess, as well. There's a few different good ideas in this slot, but Crown Quartermaster seems fine to me. It's important sometimes to have a 1-drop when you don't have the Ring of Magicka and you're in an aggressive versus aggressive matchup, so you can get on the board early and start, fighting your opponent's stuff. We should be better in those matchups, actually, since we doubled the amount of prophecies. We are still at 33 intelligence cards, so the Cunning Allies can help us out in those matchups as well. We do lose some late game against those control decks. We lost our 5-drops, and we have a bit of 6s and 7s, but not too much, so it'll all be critically important, even more than usual, that we get on the board early. So that's it for the actual deck building part of the Budget-ify Sorcerer. I think I actually only have 2 premium Dress Renegades. That's disappointing. So one of the cards in this deck is not going to be premium. That's fine. So let's take it to casual and see how it goes. Play a couple of games with it, discuss the cards as they come up, especially the new ones, and see if we can win some games. Got an Assassin to start things out, and we do have a lot of 2s and now even 1-drops in the deck, so I'll be shipping all of this without the Ring of Magicka. Just need to find an earlier play, and we don't, unfortunately, but we do have a couple. Alright, now we have 1 draw step to find a 2-drop. Not the greatest mulligan of all time, but we'll try to make it work. Oh, no 2-drop, but if he's not playing things early, I guess it doesn't matter quite as much.
What are your intentions?
It would take a lot of damage to sink into that to actually kill it, even with the Firebolt we now have, so I'll just play Haunting Spirit in the left and follow up with Renegade or Royal Sage, depending on the situation. That's a great Firebolt target, so I'd really like to have a 3-drop or a 2-drop drawn. We get Mace, but I don't really want to Mace that down. I think I'll just attack and then play Royal Sage. Try to push my offensive a bit, make the board hard to deal with.
I see you're in need of my wisdom.
You've pretty much taken over that lane at least. And the Firebolt and the Mace of Encumbrance do help us race. We can deal with that 3-1 whenever we want. Oh wow, no play. So we'll be attacking with the Sage first, because if he has Lightning Bolt, he'll want to stop the incoming damage, which would be the Haunting Spirit that hadn't attacked yet. And if he does that, we'd get the buff.
You can't escape.
So let's do that. And then let's add some keywords to the board again, and follow up with the Firebolt on the 3-1 after we do our attacks, probably. Lethal Drain. Unfortunately, I already attacked with that. Got Drain on the wrong one.
Let's shed some light on the problem.
Do not vex me.
He might be setting up for some type of Ice Storm. This is the best, worst Blackworm Necromancer I've ever seen, as we can't actually do anything with it. I guess we could just play a Mace and continue our race. Mace does keep this out of range of the Ice Storm, but we don't really mind if that dies. We could Mace on this, but it still dies to an Ice Storm. We could play Blacksmith and Mace on the Blacksmith itself, or Mace on this even though we don't push extra damage. Maybe Mace just isn't required. Let's just hit for 7 and see what happens first. Yeah, I think at this point I'll just play Blacksmith and Dress Renegade.
A strong arm is what you look at.
The Dress Renegade also dodges the Ice Storm. So if he has Ice Storm, we will have a giant Dress Renegade that can still push. I think I just not have Ice Storm. It is casual, unpredictable.
Shall we begin?
Our Blacksmith is kind of stranded over there, but we just ran out of space in the field lane. So it looks like we will have lethal. The only thing left to consider is the attack order. Oh, that's nice too. That adds a lot of damage to our push. If we're simply trying to lethal, we should probably just silence the 1-1 here, because we can mace the 5-5 anyway.
Death comes to us all.
So mace on one of these will be 6 damage. Let's try to get him to exactly that amount of life. These 2 attacks first, probably. Get him to 6. Mace on this. Target this. Blackworm Necromancer is also alive. And that's the game. So here with the ring, I think I might actually keep a Harpy against Assassin. Hoping to draw into a better 2-drop. The worst case on turn 2, we can just ring out this 3-drop.
Let's shed some light on the problem.
As we have nothing to defend against, nothing to shackle, this seems like the most reasonable course of action, and we do get the Firebolt.
The forest is my strength and my courage.
We could use the mace to get over that, but I think that's kind of a waste. I think we'll just stay on curve, probably play another one of these, even though we're drawing all of our blue cards, so I don't know if we're actually going to hit. And then just trade.
Let's shed some light
Oh, wow.
on the problem.
Not unlucky.
Be on your guard.
Could use 1 Firebolt here and also bring out the Renegade. I like that. We have an abundance of Firebolts.
I have you now.
We're taking over the board very well. So I don't really see a need to double Firebolt that. 3-1 should be fine here.
To the mud we all return.
Here we can set up the Haunting Spirit against the 5-3 to be a pretty perfect trade. Let's see if we attack and hit anything, though.
I have you now.
Don't think we really need a Shackle. If he gets a creature here, we could Shackle whatever it is.
Forest is my strength and my courage.
He could be planning to buff it, and then trade up with my 4-4. I do want to deal with that 5-3, though. It's a fine trade.
If I fall, the hiss will reclaim me. Bark and burn.
It's less of a fine trade now, but I welcome the incoming damage, and we do have Mace to deal with that.
Child's play.
I have you now.
This is the very aggressive line that also allows us to potentially trade with that next turn if for some reason we feel it's necessary. Let's use the 4-4 and the Firebolt.
The battle is yours.
And that's how it goes. Curving out on people. And playing pretty threatening things for the amount of Magicka we currently have. So those are some games with the Budget-ify Midrange Sorcerer. I do think it's pretty potent. Maybe not, definitely not on the level of the more optimal versions of the deck you may see, but definitely still pretty powerful. I do think this will be one of the more powerful Budget-ify decks we ever go over. I will be getting more of these out on a more regular basis. It's been a while since the last one, but I'll try to put them out more regularly. As always, though, if you've enjoyed the Budget-ify series so far, this video in particular, feel free to leave a like. Feel free to stay subscribed to the channel for more Budget-ify videos, other gameplay videos, deck techs, all that good stuff for Legends. Feel free to follow my stream in the description at the link. I do stream Elder Scrolls Legends daily, so you can catch me live there, and I'll see you guys next time.